All right, let's just start. All right, hello and welcome everyone. On behalf of GSA's Career Development Subcommittee, I welcome all the panelists and participants in today's workshop. Before we start, let's go over a few notes and ground rules for everyone in the attendance today. Please note that all the views and opinions shared in today's workshop are those of the panelists themselves and not the organizations they represent or work for. Additionally, any mention of a company by a panelist is not an endorsement of that given company or brand by the GSA. We kindly ask all the participants to keep their cameras and microphone off at all times for a smooth moderation of the event. To ensure that the workshop is a welcoming environment for everyone, we have added a brief code of conduct in the chat box. This event is going to be recorded, and the recording will be uploaded on our YouTube channel and GSA's Career Development Workshop Series webpage. So I would encourage our attendees to focus on the discussion with the panelists, and they can go visit the recording anytime in the future they need. Finally, we have already collected questions from all of our participants today. However, if you're welcome to ask any real-time questions as they come to our panelists by dropping them in the chat box. We'll try to cover as many questions as possible in the given time frame. All right. So today's panel discussion has been organized by GSA's Career Development Subcommittee with Jason and Abhinav as the co-chairs of our 9-member team. Special thanks to Jessica, who is the acting director of the Engagement and Early Career Program of the GSA, and Belind, who is the Engagement Professional Development Program Coordinator for facilitating these events. So before we move on with the discussion, I would like to share some brief information with our panelists today about today's attendees list. We have over 200 attendees from all across the world who registered for the event, and they primarily constitute postdocs and grad students. So not only we have great interest showing up from undergrads, but also senior academics from different career stages, such as group leaders, principal investigators, staff scientists, among other industry professionals. So we are really excited to have received such welcoming response and interest in this workshop. I think it clearly reflects our attendees' interest in learning about the career opportunities in the space of medical science liaison. So without further ado, let's begin today's discussion by first allowing our panelists to actually introduce themselves. So our senior member, Dr. Molly Seal, will start with you.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Molly Seal. I have my PhD in cancer biology from Vanderbilt University in Nashville, which is where I still live. I did a short postdoc in the same lab where I did my PhD, and then got my first MSL position as a contract MSL, and went on to stay in the MSL field for my whole career, which has been over 20 years. I was an MSL for 7 years, and then a field director or manager of MSLs for another 7 years at the same company, moved on to where I am now, which is AbbVie, and have led both oncology and immunology teams here at AbbVie. I'm recently in a new position for the last year and a half where I specifically focus on supportive clinical trials, really from the operational perspective, and I do that now across all therapeutic areas at AbbVie, so broadening my scope a little bit in a little different role that the MSL career path has led me to. So thanks, really glad to be here today.
That's amazing. Amy, we'll go with you.
My name is Amy Truitt. I have been a medical science liaison for not as long as Molly. I've been doing it for about 4.5 years. I earned my PhD from Portland State University in molecular biology and environmental science. And that's how I know Rupinda, is from working on Wolbachia with her in Vienna. So I started in breast cancer diagnostics for 2 years, and then I moved to pharmaceutical and oncology. So I still work in oncology. And I'm actually on the path right now. They're training me to be a field director like Molly did for 7 years. And so that's an exciting new path. Yeah, and I'm just really excited to be here. So thank you for having me as well.
Thank you for joining. Riley.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm happy to be here as well. I'm Riley St. Clair, and I'm quite new to the Medical Science Liaison role. I transitioned from academia just this summer, so it's been about 3 or 4 months that I've been in this role. And I got my PhD in neuroscience, looking at brain development. Mostly with cell biology. And then in my postdoc, I did a short postdoc about 2 years in genetics. And I was then a professor of teaching in life sciences, biology and neuroscience at a small liberal arts college for 2 years before transitioning to this MSL role. Yeah, I'm very happy to be here and excited to share my experiences.
We're excited to have you, Mansi. Mansi, I think.
Okay, I was muted. Hey everyone, it's my pleasure to be here. I started my journey in science probably like 15 years ago or so. Did my PhD in oncology at the Medical College of Wisconsin, and then moved, changed fields, went into neuroscience, did my postdoctoral fellowship at Baylor College of Medicine. Along the way, I realized that I wanted to do something different and not stay in academia. I moved to the pharmaceutical industry as a medical science liaison and have been an MSL for last 2 years. And happy to have a discussion today with you, see what questions you have, and help you in any way possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's awesome. We have medical science liaisons from different career stages of their lives. So let's dive into the discussion for our participants who are really excited to learn more about this career. So first and foremost, can you please tell our audience what a medical science liaison is? And what are some of the duties, responsibilities that you have in this role? Amy, we'll start with you.
I think when you're start your journey into looking into what is a medical science liaison and what do we do, it's a little bit nebulous and hard to sort of pin down exactly what your role is. And it's so different from academia that it takes a little while to really wrap your head around. And I find this even with mentoring newer MSLs is one of the biggest challenges is like, what exactly is our job? Like, what exactly is our job? And the way that I like to think about it is we build relationships to support clinical trials, education. We're actually a liaison between our company, medical affairs and clinical trial designs, and R&D with the doctors and the sites, and try to just get as much information to them and back to us as we can. I know that still feels a little bit like, what is the job? Molly probably has a little bit of, she has a lot more time in it. In my specific role right now, I was a traditional MSL for the last 4 years, and now we are switching just to early pipeline. So it's sort of like we're redesigning what we do in our day-to-day jobs, but also our strategy. And so there's this really cool thing about being an MSL is you really get to sort of define some of what you do based on your own personality, your own drive, your own interests, while you're still working for a company. And you do get to dive deep into the science. But I still haven't figured out a way to exactly describe what we do. I think Molly's probably the most experienced. Maybe she does.
You did great, Amy. And I think if I could put it simply, what we do as MSLs is we talk about the science and the medicine behind our programs and behind the assets, the compounds that we are developing into medicines. So as an MSL, you would no longer be doing the science. You would no longer be at the bench. You wouldn't be doing experiments, but you would be talking about both the preclinical, but even more so the clinical data, the mechanism of action of compounds, and explaining that mainly to physicians, sometimes working with scientists, sometimes with nurses or pharmacists, but majority of the time is explaining preclinical and clinical data to physicians to help them understand both whether they want to get involved in a clinical trial with that compound, or if it's already approved, whether that medicine is the right choice for their patients and how to appropriately and safely use it in their patients. So I think that's maybe a more basic description, but something you can think of, which is obviously a big change from the bench.
Right. No, certainly. I think it's more about communicating what you're doing rather than doing that stuff by yourself, right?
Yeah.
So
I blocked out the doing so well that I forgot that I.
it's been a while. We all have done the PhD, so yeah, I can relate to that. Doing stuff. So yeah, just connecting to that, like we all have been in the PhD grad students at one point, right? And then before switching this role, we would like to know, do you think for this specific role, a postdoc is necessary after doing your PhD graduation? Riley, we'll go with you.
Yeah, great. So as I mentioned, I did do a postdoc. It was quite short, and it was during the pandemic. I feel like I probably had quite a different postdoc experience, and many can relate to that. So actually, I felt like I did quite less of the actual research, what you would typically do in a postdoc, and I was doing more science communication aspect as well. That's when I dove into getting some teaching certificates and kind of doing more science outreach. So from my perspective, I think those couple of years as a postdoc, while I was getting the kind of the science communication aspect and the independence, I would say that you are as a postdoc, has helped me. But I know many of my peers and my colleagues who are MSLs have not done a postdoc. So I've also would love to hear what others say.
Yeah, anybody else has an opinion on that, Mansi?
Sure. That was a great point, Riley, that you brought up about enhancing your communication skills while doing your postdoc. So how is a postdoc different from your PhD? So the main thing here is, are you looking into moving into another field? Are you looking to move from oncology to neuroscience, or from some other field to oncology, So are you gaining something new there? As far as your transferable skills, what is something that you can gain from your postdoc? Is it your communication skills? Is it your cross-functional collaboration? You have to think about what are you going to gain from that postdoc? Or is it just going to be the same thing that you did in your PhD, but in a different lab, in a bigger lab with a better outreach, better publication? You have to think about, what am I gaining from this postdoc? Is it only going to be similar experiments, different from one location to another? Or am I going to enhance my communication skills? Am I going to enhance with better publications, better branding for yourself? That is really very important. Are you going to establish better collaborations? Is that lab doing something in collaboration with any other pharmaceutical company? So those are the things you have to think about. Or if you're moving from completely basic science to something that is more translational, what is the added benefit that your postdoc is giving you? And if it is giving you something benefit, then sure, go for a postdoc. As far as the requirement for the job is concerned, I think a terminal degree is sufficient as a requirement for the job. But if you want to enhance yourself in some way, then you should go for a postdoc. And if you're already doing a postdoc and you're thinking of different career paths such as an MSL, then you have to think about, what are some of the things that I can do right now that relate to being an MSL? Cross-functional collaboration, improve your communication skills, get that experience, get out there at conferences, do those presentations, and add on to your skills that you already have.
Got it.
I think it's also a good way to solidify whether or not you want to stay down the academic path or not. Because I definitely was like, no, I don't want to during my postdoc.
Yeah, so sometimes people also try to do postdoc to gain some more experience, as Mansi nicely extrapolated on this. And when you join a different role, a new one, like in the industry settings, that added experience on top of your PhD, the terminal degree, that may help you getting probably a better package or a senior position than when you join right off the bat from a PhD, right? Do you think that can be a different factor while you join in an MSL position?
From my experience and through when we hire people straight out of their PhD, I don't know that. I think if you have industry experience and then you go into an MSL role, you're more likely to come in at a higher senior position or get a better package. But I think if you're coming in as a new MSL, you're really coming in as a new MSL, and there's a lot of training that takes place, and the companies train you up really well, at least in my experience. I wouldn't be afraid to start applying for MSL positions if you don't have a postdoc under your belt, or if you're just getting ready to finish your PhD. And do a lot of networking with other people is probably the key to, I think networking may even be more beneficial to getting a role than doing a postdoc in some cases.
So yeah, you talked about training and networking, so that's a good segue for our next question. Do you think, or did you guys take any special courses, trainings to better prepare you for this role? Because it's totally different from what we do in academic research, right? So can you speak on that a little bit? Mansi, I'll go with you.
Sure. So yes, it is different, and there are some things that can help you, and then there's a lot of things out there that may not provide value, but those are there and trying to influence you. So it's really important that you separate out the good from all the noise. And what I would recommend to students is there is a course on clinical trial design. It's offered through Coursera, and that will really help you to understand clinical trials design. And that's one course that I would recommend to students. And more recently, Sarah Snyder from the Caroline Group has started a program called Aspire MSL, and that's a paid program. And I highly recommend this for students who are really serious about transitioning to MSL, because this program will really coach you, and they will walk you from step one to all the way to your interviews. So I definitely would recommend you to consider that program.
Thank you.
I will share that.
I just have one more thing that I probably should have shared right in the beginning. It is that I'm here in my personal capacity, and any comments or opinions that I share today are my own and do not reflect those of my employer. Should have said this right in the beginning, but
noted.
Oh well, I did.
Yes, Molly, you were saying something.
Yes, yeah, I will add that I did not take any courses, but there weren't a lot available when I was getting into this. I don't think there was anything available like there is now. I'm not very familiar with all of the courses out there, but I do see a lot advertised, and I know that people who have gone through them have found them beneficial. As a hiring manager, what I do see is that it helps people learn the language of the MSL role. It helps them understand it better. But I also have seen people use networking, contacting people who are MSLs and just sitting down to have discussions or phone calls with them. Also is oftentimes, it seems just as helpful, just really talking with people about the day in, day out. What is this job like? And making that decision yourself based on everything you're learning. Is this the right role for me? If you're interviewing, you want to do the best to share what you know about the role and explain why you think you would be a good fit for it. And so that's something that you can really get out of connecting with folks like us on the line, to just say, can you tell me more? If there's someone local that you can reach out to that's an MSL, connecting with them and just learning more about it, so that you really can initially make that decision for yourself about whether you think it would be a good fit, and then take that into your interviews to convince the hiring manager of the same thing.
I could not agree more with Molly. Like when I was thinking about my role, I did a lot of informational interviews. I connected with people on LinkedIn, people I used to work with before I even went to grad school who were doing an MSL role. And I think that Molly said it perfectly, that you really want to figure out if this role is for you, because it is something where you do have to be very outgoing and proactive and self-motivated and not shy and willing to make mistakes in conversations and learn from them and be coachable. That I think is a really big part. Is you see new hires come in and some of them you're like, this person is not willing to learn. Let's find it. Maybe they need to be in a different role. And so I think the informational interviews are huge, and I do them all the time. And seriously, if anybody wants to chat with me, just hit me up and I will spend, however much time you want to talk. I've helped people get interviews at our company, at different companies. I mean, I think all of us love our job so much that we're just like, everybody should be this happy. So always feel free to reach out to anybody that's an MSL. I can't imagine anyone turning you down to chat. So
I think that's amazing. Well said. And I cannot believe how many pings you're going to get after this workshop.
that's fine.
So
Yeah,
yes.
I will just echo what everyone else was saying. Like, networking and those informational interviews is what I spent most of my time when I was thinking about transitioning. I also saw some of those paid programs. I didn't do them. I think it was probably, looking back, it was more useful for my time to do those informational interviews, just to network, and exactly what Amy and Molly were saying is that it really gets a feel for what MSLs are doing, their career journey, how they entered the field. But also to say with Nancy, so I was coming from a basic science background. So I also wanted to show to the hiring managers that I was very serious about going into the kind of the clinical trial realm. So I also took some clinical trial Coursera courses and some drug development courses, and I put those on my LinkedIn profile. And I also feel like that was helpful.
So your message to your audience will be look for what the MSL roles are looking for and craft your skills according to that before actually going to the interviews, right?
Yeah. And I would also say, like, in addition to just the, getting a sense of what other MSLs are finding that they're useful and what helped them get to be an MSL, it's also, you're showing that you can network and that you can have conversations with others, which is a big part of the MSL role as well.
Okay. So in the beginning, Molly already explained to us like what the MSLs do, but if we go into a day-to-day job, Riley, can you explain to us how a day-to-day job look like for an MSL? How you guys start, how your day looks like, and how does it end? Is it like a good work-life balance? So can you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, so my typical, well, I guess it will vary depending on the day and the week. So kind of default, we're working from home. We're remote and field based. For me personally, I like to stick, if I can, to the 9 to 5 when I'm working from home. That just helps me keep good boundaries. So I might be reaching out to doctors to set up some meetings. I might be planning events for doctors to come together. Or I'll be attending conferences maybe one week, or I'll actually be out in the field meeting with those doctors. So it really does depend kind of on the day, but that's what I like about it. It's kind of, you're always doing something different. You can make your own schedule. And I will say, coming from academia, one of the main reasons why I was ready to leave my professorship position was because my work-life balance was not the best. Like, I was working in the evenings. For me personally, I felt pressured to always do more and more. So that was one of the things that I really like about that. And that's something that for me personally, I needed to make a shift. So I feel like I've gotten, you can just kind of have the best of both worlds and have a good work-life balance. Yeah, and just kind of depends on the day what you're up to.
That's amazing. I think nobody likes it more than getting a 9 to 5 and perfect work-life balance kind of job. So, Molly, we'll get back to you. What are the things you like most about this job? And are there any aspects that you dislike or you would prefer they need to be changed in your line of job?
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot of things I love about this job. And as Amy said, I feel really, really lucky to have somewhat stumbled into it and made a career out of it. And it's just been a great fit for me. One of the things I'd say I love the most is just being on the cutting edge of science. The new technologies that are coming out, the new drugs that are being tested. It's pretty amazing to always be keeping up with the latest literature and the latest findings, the latest meeting Congress presentations, and just the latest medical advances. Also, besides the data and the science, I get a chance to be around really smart and interesting people. And that's really what makes the job so wonderful day in and day out, whether it's internal people that I work with at my company or external HCPs, healthcare providers that are out there that I'm interacting with. Just a lot of really caring and really, again, smart and interesting people make it worth it. The last thing I'll mention that I love about it is the travel. And that can be a pro and con for this job because the travel does get to be a lot sometimes. But if you have an adventurous spirit and like to be visiting new places and being on planes and on the road a lot, I've been able to travel around the world for this job, as well as around the country to some of my favorite places. And that's been a real plus. On the downside, I will admit that I feel like I'm always behind because when you're trying to keep up with everything, you can never keep up. There is always more to learn. And so I always have a giant stack of papers that I haven't read yet that I want to read. I always want to know more and dig deeper. And so there is maybe just an ongoing demand in this job to stay on top of things that's really hard to do. And my to-do list is never done. And so learning, of course, how to prioritize and how to handle that and decide what really needs to be done and what can come off the list is an ongoing challenge, I would say. And then maybe back to travel. It's a lot sometimes, and the work-life balance is difficult. There are times where I may be home for a few weeks straight and not leave my house. And then there may be a few weeks straight where I am hardly ever home. And so it changes day to day, week to week, month to month. And so sometimes that is difficult to balance, and finding what works for you and for your family sometimes is a challenge, and just working that out for yourself to make some kind of a balance is a challenge, but is something that can be done.
Yeah,
that's really good to know. Yeah, Amy, would you like to add to it?
I would like to just add a couple things. I agree with everything Molly said. I love the travel. I love the gaining. I love collecting points and status. Because when you're traveling like that, it can be very exhausting. I just got back from I was in Arizona for a couple of days. I was at home for a couple of days, and then I was in San Diego for a few days. All of that time, though, when I was gone, I was just in the science so deep. I was at an immunology conference. I'm not trained in immunology, but learning about it is amazing. I was gonna say one of my favorite things is also working with the people, and you don't get to see them very frequently in person. But so when you do, it's just like it's awesome. And then one of the downfalls that I have found challenging in the last couple of years is look at whatever company you're applying for and whatever therapeutic area, look at their pipeline. I worked on a molecule that was in phase 3 in breast cancer, and unfortunately it didn't do very well in the clinical trials when they looked at the interim data. So our team had an option to take a severance package or to move to a different therapeutic area. And I moved to a different therapeutic area with another boss who I just adore. He's fantastic. And then we lost the right of, the exclusivity on our drug. So then now we are a pipeline team. So the uncertainty can be a little bit stressful. But I think once you understand that your company actually wants to retain you, and it makes a lot more sense for them to put you into a different disease state if you want to. So there's like this security, yet uncertainty at the same time. So remaining very flexible. And the other day, my manager, he said something like, it's survival of the fittest. If you can't adapt, you're not going to survive in this job. And I think that is so true. And I think in academia, you have a different kind of uncertainty where you're like constantly applying for a grant, not knowing if you're going to have to move for a new job. Are you going to have to move for your postdoc? And I'm a single parent with a 6-year-old daughter, and it's just nice to know that I feel safe and secure, even though there is a high level of uncertainty. So that's just something to keep in mind. It's both a pro and a con at the same time.
Yeah, just like everything else in the life, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think people who love travel, they should definitely go for this job, and it gives a lot of opportunities to explore new places and new connections. I would say, making collaborations.
And restaurants. Find the best restaurants.
Find the best restaurants. And I personally, what I'm getting through this discussion is that you don't really confine yourself to one specific topic, which in academia we all are. I'm working on Drosophila neurons or development, so you are only reading one specific subject. But I think you guys, you go out and beyond, getting yourself updated about different topics and the current affairs in science, and actually you get the opportunity to actually talk about it and communicate to the people, right? So I think that's really fascinating to me, and I think other our attendees can also find it intriguing. So
one thing I wanted to add about the cons that I'm still struggling with is when I travel, and speaking of good restaurants, my diet always is, I'm trying to be on a healthy diet, but when I have to travel and I know what the good restaurants are, I always eat more calories than I should. And that's something that I'm struggling with. And I go with a very pure intention that on this trip, I am not going to be eating a lot. And then I never stick to it. So,
how often do you take your workout clothes in your suitcase and not taking them out of your suitcase?
Oh my gosh, all the time.
Every trip.
You know what? My suitcase is near my door. It's not even in my room. It's like near the door, always sitting there. So, always ready to go. Yeah.
So our audience has a lot of attendees who work on Drosophila, let's say, as a model organism, right? So they have a lot of training on the basic research. How would you advise them, what can be the challenges for them if they want to move to MSL position, or maybe any other industry position as well? What would you advise them? Take any courses, or it doesn't matter, it's really about the job requirements? So what are your thoughts onto it? Riley, can you start with that?
Yeah, so I was also zebrafish and C. elegans were my background. So I was also doing a lot of basic science, no disease model for my background. So I was quite nervous about it. It's like, would I be competitive for that? But I actually how I did it was saying, okay, I have a lot of expertise in cell signaling and genetics. And I marketed myself as saying, because I have this foundational skills, that can be helpful across many therapeutic areas. So now I'm in the dermatology space where I was before in the neuroscience space. So I think that helped me. That's how I spun it, was like, I've got this foundational skills. I'll be easily adaptable, and I can be trained. As Amy was saying, there is a very extensive kind of 3-month-long onboarding process where you get to learn all of the science. But that being said, I also wanted to show that I do know some, like the clinical trials and drug development. So I was taking some of those Coursera courses as well.
Okay, perfect. Does any of the other panelists have anything to add in this?
I would say, oh yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Okay. No, you can go ahead, Amy, that's fine.
I was just going to say, I agree with everything that Riley said. I don't think I also didn't have any sort of therapeutic disease state background, but you can learn it really quickly. And I think that the benefit that I had, and that a lot of the candidates when hired in different positions that I helped interview, do go to do as many presentations as you possibly can, and practice speaking to all sorts of different audiences and adjusting whatever you're talking about, adjust it to their knowledge, and then get feedback from them to find out how you can improve. Because even when I know, like, I'm trained to be manager, I had to present something to my team the other day, and I was like, wow, this makes so much sense to me. And then I presented it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I think I've spoken a different language. I'm not sure. So getting feedback from people before you go to the interview process, and really an important thing about the interview is make sure you know the clinical trials of the, therapeutic area, whatever drug you're going to be supporting, have all that information on hand when you go to the interview. And, like I said before, any of us can help you tailor your resume, listen to your talk, try to help you out in any way we can. So, sorry, Menzies, for interrupting.
Yeah, no worries. I think both Amy and Riley added great points. What I would like to tell you is that whether you're in Drosophila mouse or any other model organism, you have to focus on what are your transferable skills. If you're focusing on a particular pathway, you have to think about how is it related to the translational aspect. What disease area can this pathway fit in? So that becomes your scientific expertise, right? You have to show that you're a subject matter expert. Then you have to think about other transferable skills. Are you a good collaborator? Are you a good team player? Do you have a strategic planning acumen? So think about all the things you've done, right? You already have strategic planning. You have designed experiments. You've conducted them. You've published them. You've spoken about them at conferences. You've mentored students. So you have done a lot of strategic planning, collaboration, and all of those things. Think about anything that you have done. For example, leadership skills. You've mentored students. That is a leadership skill too. So you already have most of those experiences throughout your postdoc or even during your PhD. And so you have to think about how do you convey those to your interviewers. And I think if you prepare well, like Amy said, then understanding yourself, your skills and strengths, and understanding what the company has and how do you fit perfectly in that scenario. That's something that you have to understand before you go in for the interview. So looking up the company, what they exactly do, their pipeline, their trials, those kind of things.
I think, yeah, that's very well said. And I cannot emphasize enough that PhD trains us in so many different aspects of academic research as well as the industry. We just don't know because we don't try to relate those skills in a transferable capacity early in our PhD studies. So I think right now people hearing this conversation, they should really focus on, you have all the multifaceted training during your PhD. You all are doing it, and it's just a matter of finding what your job needs and what skills do you have and how you can actually relate those two things together to better communicate and better sell yourself for the job. All right, Molly, we're going to switch to you by asking, since you're in such a senior position, how would you describe your career progression from when you actually started in the MSL role? So how's the journey going in the advanced?
Sure. So I started as an MSL in oncology and was focused on specific tumor types. And then as our pipeline grew and our approvals grew, I diversified within oncology to multiple different tumor types across hematology and solid tumors. My next career move was becoming a manager. And that was something that it was critical to have that MSL experience before managing people in that role. And just knowing what it was like to be out there, boots on the ground, doing the job, and then leading people and helping them to do their job and grow and develop in it was a great change. I've only worked for 2 different companies. And so switching to a different, also large company, I went from Amgen to AbbVie. making that change was also a good experience for me. Just being around different products, different people, and learning different processes for how the same job can be done was a real learning experience. And then I went through changing therapeutic areas. As has been mentioned before, you have to be flexible and agile. The job that I came to AbbVie for, we thought we would launch 3 new oncology drugs within a year or 2, and all 3 of them failed in their phase 3 trials. And so our group was dissolved. And that was my impetus for moving to immunology. But there were so many transferable skills in changing therapeutic areas. Just thinking about JAK-STAT signaling, for instance, that I was working in oncology. In dermatology, and ended up working on a JAK inhibitor for eczema, and so a lot of connections between different areas. And then in the role that I'm in now, I did clinical trial support as a part of being an MSL, and that led me into this more operational role that helps. I help with support of really coordinating how our medical affairs headquarters and MSL field teams support trials. So I'm supporting everything from oncology studies to migraine and Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's disease and HIV and eye care. So a lot more diversity in what I'm doing, but at a different level where I am now, not quite so deep into the science and more into the logistics of how to and equipping teams with the information and the tools they need to do this. So it's been a good journey, and I expect I will make more changes in the future, potentially moving to a global role where I would do more international work, or to another internal role that might similarly be cross-therapeutic area. So it's been a great journey, and still a lot of room for growth and change.
Yeah, no doubts. That's amazing to hear. So you and Amy, you talked about some failures that you encountered, right? Like companies can fail in the phase 3 drug trial test. So it's one of the questions from the audience, and I'm just trying to connect it with this. Do you have any tips or resources to stay updated on drug pipelines from different companies? Can people actually?
Yeah, it's all public. I mean, anytime, really every company has their pipeline posted on their website. So look for a company that is in the therapeutic area you may be interested in, or a company that may be headquartered near where you live or where you want to live. Search for their pipeline. It will all be there. As far as what is public information. Of course, if it's confidential, they won't post it. But typically as soon as something is in the clinic, meaning in phase 1 for patients, it's certainly online. Sometimes preclinical assets are shown. Sometimes those are not disclosed until they go into the clinic. But it's pretty easy to find that and to see what the focus for a company is as far as therapeutic areas and how broad and deep that pipeline is. Lots of times that will correlate with the size of the company. If you do this kind of job at a small startup, it's likely going to be a lot smaller and more focused. And if you do it for a large company, it will be more broad and deep.
Right.
There's one more resource that you can look up in addition to going into individual companies and checking their pipelines. Targeted oncology, especially for oncology, Targeted Oncology or OncLife, they will give you recent FDA approvals. They post that immediately as soon as the approval comes in. And you can look that up and see that, oh, this phase 3 was successful, it's approved now. And that way you can see that, okay, that means this company is going to either expand or positions will probably open up. So that's one way to kind of track where the positions might open and see if that interests you.
Great.
I would just add too that when you are looking at a pipeline, they'll show you like you have phase 1A and B, so that's your first in human trials, and phase 2 and phase 3. It's nice. It's not always realistic, but it'd be nice if there's some drugs that are in phase 1, some in phase 2, and some in phase 3. Like right now, our pipeline is all phase 1 in oncology, and so we know that we're a long way out from any drugs launching, which means we're a long way out from our team growing, and there's also a risk of a lot of those phase 1 drugs not doing well and failing. So just something to think about, like and that can change on a day. Like a large company like mine could buy a molecule, and then we have a phase 3 drug all of a sudden. So it just really depends. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this information can also be helpful for specifically international employees, because sometimes if they are not doing well and companies are in a limbo, so then they can be laid off. So it would be good for them to get this information in hand in advance, so they could do their thorough research before actually joining. So thank you for that. Riley, we'll come back to you. Do you think the difference of joining an MSL position in industry, how do you think it was different from in academia? What are the drastic changes you faced? Any similarities that you encountered, and what do you think is better? Which we already know probably.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so when I was, for in both my grad school and my postdoc, I thought I would just be a professor kind of the whole way. That's kind of the only thing that I was thinking. It's really the only thing that I was exposed to. And there's so much things that I loved about it. Like I loved the teaching. I loved the science communication, engaging with others, with my students, with the community. But as I mentioned, there's a couple of things that what I missed. So the first was when I was a grad student, you're constantly reading those papers, you're doing the experiments, and Molly mentioned it earlier. It's like I just missed that kind of cutting edge, like always kind of learning more about the science. When I was a professor of teaching, I didn't have that anymore. Instead, the papers that I were reading were teaching focused. So I missed that aspect. So with the MSL role was really appealing to me because I could still engage with others, with community, and communicate that science, but also get to be immersed in really kind of the leading edge. So that's something that I have been really loving. And also, as I mentioned, for me, I was just always, I think it's my personality too. I think I always wanted to do more. As a professor, I always felt like I needed to volunteer for things, and apply for grants and whatnot. And my evenings were full, my weekends were full, and it was just time for me to make a lifestyle change. So that's why I was kind of ready to transition away. So now I just feel like I kind of the MSL role has like so much of what I love about it, and also kind of the benefits for the work-life balance too.
So on that, what would you tell somebody who is in academia for like 20 years and they want to make a switch now? Do you think it's okay for them to jump to this career?
Yeah, definitely. I think like the feedback that I got from my manager and for my interview is like being a teacher and a professor, I think was advantageous for that. They noticed my communication and presentation skills. And I also marketed and said, like, I can think about my audience. I'm, is it an introductory course versus an advanced course? You're kind of always changing and translating your the words that you're using to meet your audience, which is also an important role for a MSL. So I think go for it.
Go for it. All right, never too late to make a change.
Yeah, never too late.
Amy, we want to know if there are any challenges you faced when you joined this role or after joining this role, and if there were, how did you overcome them?
Oh, I mean, yeah, there were lots of challenges. I think I said this in the beginning too. I think one of the biggest challenges is like wrapping your head around what am I doing day to day? Like, what is my day-to-day role? And that changes all of the time. And I think learning how to, I think we're not used to as academics, like cold emailing somebody to ask for a meeting. and to take their time and really seeing myself as a peer to like MDs and PharmDs and pathologists, and it took me a little while to get my confidence to feel like these people, why do these people want to talk to me? Like, what value am I bringing? What is my value proposition that I'm bringing to them and that they're bringing to me? And I think that was probably the most difficult part, is trying to figure out how to send like not a 16 sentenced email, but you send a 2-sentence email to try to get their attention. What are those grab words, and really trying to figure out how to get the meetings. I would say it was really logistical things that were the hardest part. And then I think one thing we've sort of overlooked here is there is a very large salary disparity between industry and academia, and that was so helpful for me as a single parent. Like, it just was, and I think that's we haven't talked about that as being such a pro to our job, but it really is. And so that being said, the other challenge that I didn't do in my first job was I didn't negotiate. I didn't feel confident enough to negotiate. And no matter if you're coming from a PhD or a previous MSL role, be sure to learn how to negotiate for your salary and other perks that you can get. Don't be obnoxious about it, because they will turn you down. But know your value, and don't be afraid to ask for what you deserve, I would say.
Well said. Yeah. I think negotiation is always important in all of the roles. Just know your worth, know your value, and based on that, how much you can contribute. And it's a two-way street, right? They need you as much as you need them. So
yes, yeah.
Always remember that.
They invest a lot in training and retaining you is a big deal. So I've only known one person to be on a PIP or a personal improvement plan in the last 4.5 years. And that's where basically, you're kind of on your way out the door. So that takes a long time for someone. I think the person had been there for 7 years. So yeah, they really want to keep you and train you and make sure you're happy, at least at my company.
I think it's good and a little bit relaxing to hear that they train you. So you're not really jumping into something dark, and they tell you what to do and prep you for that.
And you have a mentor too, like throughout everything.
Mm-hmm.
You always have people to talk to and help you.
Yeah. I think that's amazing. Yeah. So Molly, if one of our attendees, they apply to your company, right, for an MSL role. So what are you looking for in them? How do they prep for a successful interview?
Yeah. I'm looking for someone who's a good communicator, and who is smart, because I think if I can pick up that somebody's smart and they can communicate well, then I can teach them what they need to do a great job. Someone who's curious, who has tenacity, and demonstrates that they are a go-getter. People who are organized, because a lot of this, you are on your own. Maybe you are given big picture, here are your goals, here's what to do, but then it's up to you to execute this. So really self-driven people. And I really like to see that someone knows what they're getting into. I want it to be a good fit for me and for them. And so hearing that they are prepared, and that they, again, can explain why they think they'd be a good fit is such a benefit over the interviews that I do, where someone is literally asking me, can you tell me what this role is, or what an MSL does? I expect them to come to the interview having asked someone else that, and being able to tell me why they think they're a good fit for it. So preparation and demonstration of some of those skills, as well as what was mentioned earlier about agility and flexibility, because that's a big thing in this role. Your job can change very quickly if something fails, or if there's a reorganization in the company or in your department. And so demonstrating how you've handled changes before, and that you're okay with that, I think is really critical. And then I would say also tailoring your resume to a job, instead of sending out multiple CVs that just list everything you've done is a difference between academic positions and an MSL, or any industry role. Really tailoring that resume for each and every job that you apply for, to make the connection between what it is that this specific MSL role is looking for, and what you have in your background that connects to that. That's what's going to help your resume stand out from the 100 other ones that come in the pile, that really show that you could be a good fit for this. And then maybe last, I do think that even if you have a basic science background, any clinical experience, or maybe a better word is even exposure, that you can get, and that doesn't mean injecting patients, but it might mean doing some work to look up how a specific disease is treated. What are the current standard guidelines for treatment? Reading or talking, if you can, to a physician, if you can meet someone who's treating this disease, to find out what the big controversies are in the field, or to find out what they think about the compounds that you would be representing at this company. If you can make a connection with anyone like that to get some real world input into what's going on out there in reality, instead of just reading articles, also really shows your interest and brings it home that you can go the extra mile to make a difference, and that you're really interested in this.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. I think our attendees can learn a little bit more about prepping themselves now in a better way. So we have only 5 minutes left, and I want to pick some of the questions from audiences. It's a very interesting question, so feel free to jump in. Do you ever find yourself withholding non-advantageous personal ideas about the drugs or trials you're promoting in basically an effort to do your job?
Is the question like internally or to our external stakeholders, like our doctors?
I think externally, yeah. They don't mention it, but I feel like when you're doing your job promoting the drugs and trials, do you withhold some of the shortcomings of those drugs just to?
So I think the key to an MSL role is you're not ever promoting, and you're always giving a balanced and objective opinion. So you present the bad with the good for whatever molecule you're working on to every doctor. That's a huge compliance issue if you don't do that. So our job is made so that we are separate from commercial, that we are never promoting anything. We're not promotional. So yeah.
And I want to add to that is that as an MSL, we're doing data dissemination, right? So there are two aspects to that, efficacy and safety, and you have to be balanced. If you're talking about efficacy, you have to also talk about safety. So there's nothing that you have to hide about it. It's data, and you have to be unbiased and present it as it is.
Got it. And can you actually work as a freelance medical science liaison?
I'd say the similar thing to maybe what you think of as freelance would be a contract MSL. And so you not necessarily freelance, but you may work for a kind of a third-party company, which then contracts with the company to hire MSLs, often for short-term positions, maybe short-term being maybe a year-long contract. At which time it may be renewed and you might continue another year, or you might get reassigned to another company or another area. So it's not usually as much of a stable job. It's not as much of a stable job as working directly for a company, but it is a good way to, someone asked about how'd you get your foot in the door? It is a good way to start out and get that MSL experience under your belt. And then once you have MSL experience and have been trained, either staying with that contract company who will place you on additional short-term assignments, or transitioning into a different role that's permanent is easier to do once you have that experience.
Okay. All right, I think the last question before we let you go. I think this is very abreast to what is going on in the world these days. Like, there are latest technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning that are taking over many of the jobs. Do you think these technologies would take over an MSL's job or certain aspects of it in the near future? So what are your thoughts on it?
I would say there's no substitution for a human-to-human interaction. So yeah.
No aspect at all, like
I can't think of anything that would not benefit us. That would take over. Whatever it would take over would probably be beneficial to our job and make it a little bit easier for us, but I don't think we'll ever be replaced. You can't replace the one-on-one face-to-face interaction with a doctor. I don't know if someone else has a different opinion, but that's how I feel.
Yeah, go
I
for
agree.
it.
AI already is helping us to enhance our research and our data analytics and things like that. We use machine learning and AI all the time in different processes the last few years, but it doesn't take the place of a person talking to another person, usually face to face, even virtually. And our AI just isn't good enough to do that. I don't think it ever will be, because I'd say half this job is science and half is relationships, and building that trust and getting to know someone so that you can better communicate that science and be of value to them and to your company is something that AI can't do.
Maybe thinking about, like, we're doing this panel, but you could have just put your questions into Chat GPT, but you needed us to come and talk to you. So
I think it has been a great conversation, very, very encouraging, and I think we all learned a lot. I want to keep going, but we have to keep the time into account. So I really want to thank all of the panelists today. The attendees, they can always, I think they can reach out to you all if they have any specific questions. And moreover, we are compiling a resource folder where each one of our panelists, they are going to provide some of the materials that they think can be helpful for you guys to better prepare for this role, or how they actually got their foot in the door, so you can learn better from that as well. So with that, on behalf of GSA's Career Development Subcommittee, I will thank all the panelists for their time and their valuable advice, and all the attendees for participating in today's discussion. We look forward to your inputs and feedback after the workshop to help us keep organizing these kind of events in the future and learn more about them. So once again, thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of the day. We'll keep in touch.
thank you so much for having us.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.